Welcome to Sproutcast, where we speak with changemakers, social innovators, and entrepreneurs about how to make the world a better place. And now, here's your host, Julia Duffy.
Welcome back to Sproutcast. My name is Julia Duffy, and I'm here today with Abigail Forsyth, co-founder and managing director of KeepCup. We'll be chatting about businesses doing good, the challenges of communicating your values in different markets and communities, and what it's like in action to be a B-Corp. Thank you so much for joining me today, Abigail.
It's a pleasure, Julia.
For anyone who somehow doesn't know what you do at KeepCup, it would be great if you could kind of tell us the mission of your organisation, but also how you got on the journey to starting KeepCup.
Okay, so my brother Jamie and I started a business in 1998 called Blue Bag. We'd been to London and seen the success of Pret a Manger with their convenience-based food offering and wanted to do the same in Melbourne. And we started that and we ran that business for 6 years. And over that period, I just became sickened by the amount of disposable packaging we consumed as a business and the number of people drinking coffee from a takeaway cup. When we first started in 1998, it was quite unusual for people to get a takeaway coffee. And in fact, I remember a lot of people saying, this is revolting, like I feel like a baby sipping out of a paper cup. Fast forward to 2016 and we're all doing it without a second thought. So it was really about reducing waste and reducing the impact of that convenience packaging that drove us to start KeepCup. And that's been and continues to be the driver today.
And at what point did you kind of realise that you could perhaps produce a solution to this problem that you were seeing? And how did you know that that was something you could take from perhaps just something you were offering within your own facilities to something that you could actually produce for other people to purchase?
Well, the short answer is we didn't. So really it was born out of a desire to offer something in our own cafes that would encourage people to reuse. And what we did is for a long time we observed what people were doing in our stores and what happened not only from a customer point of view, but what happened behind the machine. So current reusable offerings in 2007 didn't fit under the group heads of the machine. They had to be heated before they were refilled. They weren't particularly cool, like people who brought in a reusable were super greeny. And in order for it to work, it needed to be more than the super greenies who were involved. Everyone has to play their part. And then also just how the transaction went through at the till. So we looked at all those things in designing KeepCup. And when we started, we wanted to have it manufactured in Australia and designed in Australia because we were really just designing for our own market. And it was only when the product became a success that we ventured into global markets, but the product's still made here.
And could you tell me a little bit more about this sustainability movement or campaign that you have connected with the product and how much your organisation kind of leans in that direction or about kind of producing a product that people want to buy and that people like?
It's a chicken and egg. You've got to do both because our tagline has become feel good, do good. So people's motivation to purchase or change behaviour or do something positive can't be around a should or a guilt. You have to entice them with something more appealing, something more positive. Like we all run on positive energy, not negative energy. So having a product that is fit for purpose, that looks good, that works in the specialty coffee environment has been really important to the success of the business. The fact that baristas behind the machine will sort of say good on you when you hand over a KeepCup rather than roll their eyes is in part product design and in part marketing. And then that's important to ensure people continue to use the product, which is how it gets its sustainability credentials. It is a sustainably designed product in and of itself, but if it's not used, then it's not sustainable at all. So we do a lot of work there to engage people around reuse and to connect our product with its purpose. And one of the things we do is we have a pledge-based program called Reuse HQ on our website where people can go in and count the number of disposable cups they would usually use in a week and pledge to stop using them. And then it will send you a little count saying, you've just saved enough energy to power a light bulb, grow a tree, just to kind of give people a few little encouragements on that reuse journey.
And in terms of this positive impact and kind of generally affecting change in terms of getting people to use the disposable cups less often, what does success look like for you? What kind of impact and how big an impact are you trying to have?
We're trying to get rid of disposable cups, I guess, is the short answer. Well, unfortunately, I don't think we've been particularly successful because we're sort of part of the growth of coffee globally anyway. So more people are drinking coffee than ever before and drinking it in a takeaway style. So
perhaps before a solution such as yours became more generally used, people may not have even been aware or given thought to the issue of disposable cups. So do you think the people who are just now becoming aware, there's still some positive impact in that in terms of people generally creating awareness of sustainability solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, that's a big part of what we do. And I don't know if you've seen in the UK, there's recently been a guy called, I forget his name, but he's done an awareness about, he's driving around the UK in a bus covered in disposable cups and making a lot of noise about how they're not recyclable and some of the greenwash that some of the larger coffee chains there are promoting around the fact that when they say cups are compostable and biodegradable, they have to go into commercial composting facilities and they're not doing that. They're just going to landfill. So really drawing people's attention to the impact of convenience culture, I think, is really important and goes into so many areas, reusable bottles, plastic bags, a lot of things people are using without thinking twice, that really when you aggregate what happens to those disposable items is catastrophic in terms of its impact on the planet.
I was interested in what you mentioned about people coming onto your website and tracking their kind of not using disposable cups anymore. And in terms of the impact that your organisation has, I was wondering, are there other ways that you measure that? And how do you communicate that with possible consumers or other stakeholders or just the public generally?
It's pretty difficult to measure, to be honest, because you're measuring the impact of not doing something. So you're measuring absence rather than presence. So, seeing people on the street with reusable cups. So what we're really trying to do is make reuse the normal behaviour and using a disposable cup the abnormal behaviour. And currently it's very much the other way around. So the other thing is we work with corporations to do the same thing, so they can aggregate the data of what impact their staff are having bringing disposable cups into the building. So we had an instance where Australia Post want to get a 6-star rating on their building in the city in Melbourne, and they can't get a 6-star rating because of the waste of disposable cups in people's rubbish bins in their building.
That people are bringing in externally?
Yeah.
Oh,
they're externally bringing in materials that that go to landfill.
And so I understand KeepCup has now been growing beyond Melbourne and Australia, where you began, to international premises and international sales. And I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that process and kind of what the journey of growth has been like for KeepCup.
Yeah, basically we didn't even decide to go international. We had a website which sold in multiple currencies right from the outset, so we got inquiries straight away, and really we just followed those. And our belief is and has been that whilst we need to protect our IP through formal legal registration, the best way to protect it is through growing the brand and growing brand awareness about who we are and what we do. So we really followed those sales. In 2010 we opened an office in the UK. And I guess, things went so well in Australia. It was really a product that had been on a lot of people's minds and that Australians were thinking about. And we thought it would replicate the same in the UK, and it really didn't. And took us a long time to really gain traction in that market. It took the growth of some of the independent specialty coffee retailers to share what KeepCup was all about for us to get traction there, but that's going very well now. And then in 2013, we opened in the US. And again, it's completely different. So different cultures, different attitudes to personal responsibility and sustainability. So whose job that is. I think in Australia, people take personal responsibility for that and are very interested in the natural environment. Just being in Singapore, where you don't see any waste ever on the street, so you'd never know that disposable products were a problem because you don't see them. And their communication around responsibility is more about being it's more around manners and kindness rather than looking after the natural environment. So different markets talk to that issue in different ways. So it's understanding them and adapting your message.
That's really fascinating. I guess I'd never thought about how you have to rephrase or reshape how you talk about the impact that you want to have depending on the market it's aimed for. Is that something that you actually think about in Australia too, in terms of capturing different markets for people who might not be your typical user?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about how you frame, the underlying message is always the same, but then how you frame it, how you bring people into the conversation and engage them is the topic, is what we do.
Back to the I guess the growth of KeepCup, I'm interested in how you think about and how you balance the growth of a commercial enterprise with your desire to kind of reduce consumption, and whether you kind of worry about keeping that balance right and about losing your purpose.
Absolutely. Yes, that is, constantly. We began with a business that I thought I could run out of, my shed at home. So a really small ambition and with that a small footprint. But as you grow, you start to, you get warehouses in so we've got a warehouse in the UK, a warehouse in the States, so you triple your inventory. So that means you've got to increase your turnover to cover the costs of running those businesses, and you can start to, you can see how some of your principles can start to slide as you have to get a certain amount of revenue to keep the doors open. So, that is a constant conversation. I guess a good example is we make the cups and lids and plugs are all still made in Australia. And we're developing a new product, which meant we had the tool that makes the cups. We had an additional tool. So I thought, well, we'll move it to the UK so we can reduce the freight, the environmental footprint of shipping the cups to the UK. And when I got the pricing back in the UK, it was almost double the price is in Australia to do the same thing. So I was like, from a capitalist, economic rationalist point of view, that seemed like a really dumb move to move the production there for that local market. And I spoke to one of our staff here who's been here for a long time. She said, Abby, what are you doing? You've got to go with your principles and you've got to be confident that there are other like-minded people like you who are going to value why you made that decision. And so we did it, and we've since worked on the price. But, the impact of having a local manufactured product for the UK market is enormous. So even though it costs us more, you're going to get better traction in that community. So so the decisions are quite complex about what's going to have the best environmental impact.
That's fascinating that you really have to, you have to think about what's important to keep your integrity, but also to be able to genuinely express that to your consumers and to your users as part of what it's about. Some of these questions that you're facing, I guess, are quite new for some types of organizations, because I think we're increasingly seeing organizations or companies aiming for this doing good model. And I'm just wondering, kind of harking back to what we were talking about earlier when you first started KeepCup, was this an idea that you were familiar with, that you could have a business with the doing good model in your mind, or did you just kind of jump into it without knowing that was a possibility, really?
No, I mean, I think it was, that's bred in the bone. That's always been probably a philosophy I've had instilled in me from my family life, that, you want to do the right thing by your community, your staff and the environment when you do things. I just think the environment's now starting to play a larger part in everyone's conversation. When we started in 2007, you really had to identify as a greenie to have a stake in the sustainability conversation. And so in the last 10 years, that has changed enormously. It's got to everyone on the planet has a stake in that conversation and feels a responsibility and also a right to be making choices. So I think one of the most important things KeepCup's doing is it's, some of the bigger players are only going to change based on consumer demand. So if consumers are demanding locally grown and locally manufactured products, well, companies will find a way to deliver them. So, I think the exciting thing is about the power of individual purchasing decisions and what motivates people to buy and to consume the way they do.
Now, you've spoken about some of the hurdles you face, as with like the shipping the machine over and the kind of balancing the costs there. Are there any things that you think now, looking back, you would have done differently with KeepCup with this in mind, or just in terms of starting the business more efficiently?
Oh, yeah, heaps of things.
So perhaps you could share some of these with our listeners.
I'd say I sometimes feel like, how do I say this? Not like a fraud, but people get up and talk about how amazing they are that they've started a business that, has been successful. But in truth, we were the right product at the right time, and it sort of took off in Australia. And for the first 5 years, it was really about, a lot of it was understanding why it was successful, why it resonated with Australian consumers, and then how to replicate that in other markets. And the naivety we had was we thought, it's worked in Australia, it's going to work all over the world. And that's simply not true. You have to adapt for different markets. Not adapt for different, you just have to communicate differently. The values and the principles are still exactly the same, but how you engage and what are the drivers in other markets is really important, and the level of maturity they're at within their coffee culture or their sustainability missions is really important. So we probably would have done a few things slower and a few things faster had we known that.
Now, this was your second business with you having already started Blue Bag. Do you think there are some lessons that you brought from the first experience that changed the way you did things in KeepCup, and that perhaps some people jumping into their first business might, want to know about?
I'd like to think so. Probably I've made exactly the same mistakes. I mean, you always, my strengths are probably in the sales and marketing side of the business, but setting up a platform for your business to run on is really important, because as your business grows, you start to really lose traction if your accounting system or your IT structure isn't set up for growth and for ease of use. So, I think my brother probably was the one who always had an eye on, I was busy running out of the shed. He probably had an eye that it could be a much bigger business than it was, and he sort of set up those structures that protected us for a certain level of growth.
Now, I spoke to Alicia Darville of B-Lab Australia and New Zealand in March, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to chat with you quickly about B-Corps, because I understand KeepCup is a B-Corp. Could you talk me through the process of why you decided to become a B-Corp and how you went about it?
Sure. So from the very outset, we've wanted to make a product that is, we've got sustainable principles in our design, we've got sustainability in our supply chain and how we deliver things and all these things, but there's no way for us to evidence that in any certifications that currently exist in the marketplace. So people would ask us if we're fair trade. No, we're not, because it's just not appropriate for us. They also asked us for a CE mark in Europe, which is for electrical goods. So there's an appetite for people wanting some third-party reassurance that you are who you say you are, but there was no mechanism for that for what we did. So I found B-Corp, one Saturday afternoon, I was like, this is exactly who we are and what we stand for and what we want to do. But we're also a long way off that. So not only was B-Corp a good external marketing tool, it's also been fantastic for us for our internal governance, because, I started a business because I wanted to solve an external problem, and lo and behold, we've now got 40 staff, and probably for a long time was pretty poor at looking after them and bringing them on board with the mission. And B-Corp provides a structure where you've got, get an employee handbook, make sure your staff have position descriptions, make sure there's a org chart, all these really basic things, but they actually provide a pretty nice blueprint for you to create those yourselves as your business grows, so you look after your internal organisation. So it serves two things for us. One, the people buying off us can see that we are who we say we are, and there's independent evidence of that. And then internally, it's really helped deliver that core purpose better for decision making within the business and a growth path for our staff.
With B Corp being quite a new idea, especially in Australia, and I guess you guys are kind of early adopters in a sense, do you find that others externally receive the B Corp idea well, or are you having to educate them about it at the same time as letting them know that you are a B Corp?
Yeah, probably we're having to educate them at the same time, but it's a pretty nice and easy concept to grasp. It's, we look after what standards for community, for environment, for transparency, and for looking after our team. So they're 4 things that, they're in the news right now. It's things people are thinking about all the time. So it's always received with a great deal of interest and welcome.
But there is kind of, I guess, as we spoke about earlier, kind of an emerging market of organisations that are behaving as yours does with this kind of social impact in mind. Are there any others kind of, not necessarily in your field, that you know of that you think are doing really interesting things in a similar way to you that you maybe want to give a shout out about?
Well, you know what I did think of yesterday that I don't know if it's going to be relevant to you, but there's a gallery in Melbourne called Gallery Funaki, and Katie there stocks a whole lot of independent Australian jewellers and designers. And I was in there and I saw this brooch, and it was this beetle made out of old LP records.
Oh, wow.
And it was just so beautiful. And a lot of the pieces she has in there have a story that's really similar. And I bought the brooch and I said, I would never think twice about buying a pair of shoes or a top or something, but I always feel guilty buying jewellery for myself. And she goes, yeah, a lot of people are like that. And she goes, but you're supporting Australian artists when you buy stuff from her store. And I guess it made me really think about consumption in that fashion world and how people, we all want to wear and have, fashion's important to a lot of people, and we want to buy things that look unique and are a bit different.
Well, I guess a brooch like that probably lasts forever too, whereas a pair of boots you wear out in no time, and I got the added benefit of she's obviously like upcycled something to make that.
Yeah. So, I just thought that was quite an interesting conversation as particularly more women are in the workforce and we've got independent, I think in my mind, I don't know if it's just my generation, but there's a sort of assumption that, people have to buy jewellery for you because you're a woman. But just this sort of, I thought it was really, an interesting thought around, and what that means in our culture that, you would be consuming if you, think of our ancient tribal cultures who, all the fashion was about jewellery and that sort of adornment, and how much less of an impact that has on the environment if it's jewellery as opposed to, 25 dresses or, I just thought it was, Anyway, and she's an awesome person, so, yeah.
Wonderful. That's a great recommendation. Something different. I like it. And I guess before we end off, if I just wanted to, generally ask you any advice you might have for someone who's starting out, wanting to make some impact, wanting to transform an idea they have into kind of a practical reality in the world.
I would say, if you're thinking of it, thinking of something similar. So my grandfather used to say lots of people talk about it, but not many people do it. So go ahead and do it and bring people in, bring people on your journey, because I've had so much help over the years by talking to people, getting their ideas, getting their support. So I think people often think they've got an idea and they can't share it because they've got to keep it under wraps. But I'd say a really important thing is to bring people along to help you.
Excellent. And I guess just to end off, how can people find out whatever's going on with KeepCup or get in contact if they want to find out more about what you do?
They can contact us at keepcup.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Sproutcast today, Abigail. It's been a really interesting journey talking about where you've been with KeepCup, and I guess a slightly different organisational idea than some of the others we've had on Sproutcast. So thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure. And I hope everyone's using a reusable cup.
Excellent.
Did you enjoy this episode of Sproutcast? Visit sproutcast.net to sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter includes copies of the show notes and additional content from each episode.